Hi everyone, Dan Goodstein here with IRPA AI. I'm joined today by Ashish Gupta. He's the digital hyperautomation analytics and AI expert for McKinsey and Company. Ashish, good to be with you.
Hey, thank you so much, Dan. Pretty excited to talk to you today about my journey and also in general take up any questions that you might have.
No, great. So before we jump in, just give everyone a little bit of your background for those who don't know you.
Sure. I think my professional journey has started almost 18 years ago, and when I kind of started working for IT service providers, and that's where I kind of got introduced to IT world. I supported big clients, by virtue of IT service providers, all sort of infrastructure support, application support, and led pretty big teams, right? At some point of time, my team size was almost 300. I mean, I was like kind of wondering throughout the year at whom to talk and how to talk and things like that. And then I think way back in 2008 is when I was kind of introduced to automation. That's where, I worked with few of my clients to identify what and how can we introduce automation, and then changing almost 3 to 4 companies. So I worked in likes of Wipro, HCL, Infosys, and then my last organization was Accenture, and I'm in McKinsey from last 6 odd months. So the journey has been pretty exciting. It has been always been a learning experience, and I guess the lot of evolution has happened in this industry in last couple of years. Once things have started becoming more digitalized, and I think there's a lot of participation from everybody into the organization.
Yep. So help us start at the beginning. What technologies are you using? Is it primarily the pureplay RPA? Are there other technologies, and are there any AI components to what you're working on with clients right now?
Yeah, so let me paint the picture for you. I think if the similar question would have been asked almost like 6 to 7 years back, that's where RPA was the hot word. People were gung-ho about how do they use RPA for automation. And those were the days, right, where people were trying to pick up a couple of activities and then they were trying to look through on what and how can they really automate. But then that journey was pretty exciting because this was the first time when people used to see that there's something which is being done by a machine, which was erstwhile done by a human. But then let me try to kind of create a quadrant to tell you that how the technology really works. So in any sort of technological support, right, be it application maintenance, development, infrastructure support, or services, or any kind of business processes, typically you have a couple of tasks. First kind of task that you have is pretty much rule driven, right? So you already know the steps that you need to take. So that is one area which has been basically automated using RPA, and then possibly people came in, and then there are different sort of technologies, like for example within the tools there were different workflows that were being set up, and hence by virtue of it that automation can happen. So I have experience across all sort of RPA tools, be it Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, Work Fusion, to name a few. And then of late I've also seen tools like ServiceNow, ITSM Remedy have introduced the concept of workflow automation. So you can customize the workflow, you can build and create or use the existing workflow to automate. So this typically covers your tasks which are predefined sets. The second thing is where you need to take a decision at some point of your process. You need to identify, okay, now this has happened. Now what should I do now? So for example, you're working on an application, and then you identify that now you needed to identify what is the next step that you do. So then you go and check the logs, and then you go and check the infrastructure components, and then identify what is that next decision that you take. So RPA basically cannot solve this problem. That's where you need technologies which can really do real decision making for you. And that's where AI comes into the picture, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and things like that, right? So this is, typically a kind of task and activities which are done by pretty senior level within the IT team, and that's where we bring in the flavor of AI. Now, AI is nowadays known pretty much by the name of AI Ops, which essentially means that you are integrating artificial intelligence in your operations, and hence your decision making will be done by either a wrapper that you create in the form of an AI, or you use tools like MookSoft, or you use any of the tool to kind of do that decision making for you. So that's the second component, and the third component is typically, which is where at this point of time, I think our technology has not been advanced, where you need to do complex decision making, right? To a large extent, the another kind of tools which have started coming up into the market have started shaping this up, and a bit of automation has been seen. That's where you needed to, let's say, orchestrate across different platforms, across different tools, across different applications. And hence, this is basically a combination of somebody, supervising or orchestrating the entire process for you, and then doing that automation, and then checking out that decision making, and then seeing and going to the next component, and then to the next component, and ensuring that that part is done. So this is becoming, I would say, orchestration is the third component, which is also kind of coming up pretty well. And I would like to call out, platforms like IAU, right, and which are really, really great, and then they are really helping us to do an end-to-end automation. So if at all an organization truly look into the kind of gamut of tasks that they kind of handle, then if I have to bucketize, then the tasks which are being driven by Runbook would typically be around 40 to 50%, out of which they can easily automate 20 to 30%. And then the other 50% is composed of 20 to 30%, which would be a decision making. This is a little complex, and hence I would say it takes a lot of time to develop your AI asset. So hence you can only automate, let's say, 20 to 30%, which again makes it 10%. So 30 plus 10 makes it 40%. And the remaining 25% is again, by bringing in a great orchestration component, which can do complex coordination between different tools and technologies, can also automate roughly around 10%. So then roughly, if an organization is serious about automation, by pursuing automation across these three areas, they can really get, a benefit, a productivity gain of around 35 to 40% easily. That's my take, and I think I have kind of done it for a lot of such clients in my experience, and pretty much possible.
Yeah, so Ashish, one of the things I wanted to get a sense from you as well is, what when you think of some of the clients you've done this for, right? What sparked the initial desire to automate, and so many of the conversations I had, like you say, 7-8 years ago, it was almost always cost, but that's changed a bit. I'm curious as to if you've seen that change, and what problems are you typically trying to solve, if there is a typical one.
Okay, I think it's a very interesting question, Dan. Productivity enhancement has of late being one of the widely accepted levers for automation, but I guess now that is kind of graying out. In my view, if I have to look at automation, then automation is basically a solution to the monotony that our typical engineer has, right? Think about an engineer who is for the entire 8 to 9 hours of his shift doing the same thing over and over and over again. Technically, and also from a process perspective, his learning is not that much. And hence, I would say it is a great way to help your employees bringing a great set of satisfaction. And I would call that as EX, your employee experience. So that's the first lever that I have. The second lever is basically CX, which is your customer experience. Now, by bringing in automation, you not only can really do an automation of the task and activity, but think about that you have a problem with the password. Now you have created a ticket, and somebody as and when will get time will look at it and then will resolve that problem. Now, with the way the technological landscape has been changing, there are various solutions. One of them is, of course, a chatbot, right? You can ping up a chatbot, and the chatbot can actually do that password reset within less than a minute or something like that. So then you have a wow experience. Not only that, right? You have a conversational AI, right? Tools like IPsoft and Amelia are really doing a lot of transformation into the way the IT services work. So you basically are able to help the customer as and when they need, right? Couple of times we've seen IT is available, let's say 8x5 and 10x5 and things like that because of geographical and country limitations. But then with all these technological advancement and automation in general, I think you can really enhance the customer experience. One of the ways which I could see was, typically clients want to really understand what is happening in IT, right? They just don't want to restrict themselves. They wanted to contribute a lot, right? And if you would know that a very recent advancement in this area is actually a low-code platform. Now you can imagine a business user can actually come forward and he can create the workflow of an application and create a work application by itself. So then at some point of time, you're actually bringing them into the journey of technology or an IT. And that's where you kind of give them a great experience. So in my view, apart from the productivity levers, EX and CX are two great things that you bring in. You're enhancing your employee experience, enhancing your customer experience by virtue of automation.
So give me a sense, and I know you can't mention any customer names in particular, but if you think about a handful of clients that you're working with right now, I'm curious as to kind of what their status is, where they are in the journey, and any particular challenges that you see kind of routinely popping up?
I would say I have worked mostly around mostly with IT service providers. And I spent a lot of my time in Accenture, and I would say I was in Accenture at the time when this whole transformation in general at the industry level is happening. And I must mention that Accenture is really leading the pace for automation by saying that it is because the change management process within Accenture is pretty fast. And hence things really gets adapted really pretty well. And I think in general, Accenture knows how that kind of change can be implemented pretty faster. But still, everything that we see does not really come up without any challenges. One of the bigger challenges that we always see that, when you as an IT service provider come up with any kind of automation use case, and then when you go and take it back to your clients, the bigger problem is that how would you integrate it with their tool, right? Because every client would have their own, automation vision, would have their own way of how you do it. But then IT service providers have more experience into this technology, and in general they have seen more, scenarios than the clients, and hence, this then becomes a bit challenging. And then now, as you see, that there are always multi-vendor environment, and hence one vendor will have their own way and the other vendor will have their own way. And hence clients really find it difficult to identify what can be a common and a unique way by which they can bring in automation strategy, and hence can look forward for adapting a few of them and then possibly enhancing their customer experience and all that, right? I think this is a technological problem. Culturally, a lot of times, clients who are having, and of course every business is sensitive, it's very difficult for them to start maybe creating a trust that something which was being done by a human now being augmented by an RPA. So how can they trust it? What happens if it fails? So I think that trust factor has always been a challenge. Of late, I've seen clients have now started doing it. And I think there are ways to solve this problem, right? You might want to start off doing a POC for them, and then you scale that further. So in general, I would say these are top things which I have seen across different clients. But along with that, I must also mention that the hype cycle of automation has been pretty fast. So the rate of change that is happening in the area of automation is really faster than any such changes that have happened in IT in last couple of decades. right? So that's my viewpoint, Dan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, take us through the next. So you've identified the issues, you've identified the set of technologies, right? And now maybe there's some starter automation or some siloed automation, and now you want to scale. How are you helping your clients get to that level of scale and get kind of beyond that random act of automation that we all start with?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because automation, even if when you talk about RPA, that in general takes some bit of time to start showing you the outcome. Maybe it might not happen within weeks' time. It might couple of times take months, because you might need to tweak the workflow and tweak the way you coded the task to be automated. So I think what have really worked well is, the best part would be that you get into a design thinking session with the client, understand what are their aspirations, and then create their roadmap of what do they call it as an automation journey, right? Not just an automation use case. For example, in year one, they wanted to kind of take up, wanted to go easy, and then wanted to just test the waters with testing out some RPA use cases. In the year two, they wanted to look out for some of the AI use cases. And then you create this journey in collaboration with them and identify any kind of tools and technologies which they really want, they have it in their vision, and then you can really adapt it. And then you create their tactical implementation plan that, in order to achieve it, these are the problem areas that we needed to solve. You might need to procure licenses, you might need to hire people to kind of make that working. And then these are the immediate next steps that you need to take to make that happen. So I think a roadmap really helps much better, because then client would understand that they would start getting the value from the 6 months. They'll start getting the ROI, the return of their investment, from the 9 month onwards. And that would happen, maybe some X or Y percentage will come in this month. And then at this point of time, they need to make that investment. And then getting their leadership buy-in also is easy. So I would say, in general, a roadmap for automation along with a fully proved tactical implementation plan really helps. And then you kind of also ensure that you get in, the leadership attention, and make them aware about the status that is ongoing. Keep giving them confidence, giving them some client credentials of how and where it has really worked, so that they get that faith that it is not a greenfield deployment for them. It is actually has really helped different and other clients, right? So I think this has widely worked for a lot of the clients, and I'm sure this can actually work for others as well.
Ashish, last question. Looking forward, what's next for you and your clients? And are there particular technologies or solutions that you're evaluating or particularly excited about?
So I think there are two key trends of Gartner which I would like to mention, and I think they are very relevant in the present context. The first trend is about hyperautomation, right? So hyperautomation, as a definition, means automate everything that is automatable, right? And I think for last 6-7 months, or rather a year, I was searching that whether there is a word which can describe the situation. The second part, as you would see and as you would imagine, that COVID has really brought us to a situation where operating from anywhere was actually a nightmare earlier. People have really struggled through. But now I think this is going to be a new focus where every organization would look forward for that. How can they ensure that all of their employees can operate from wherever they are, right? So operations anywhere is the other key trend that is really picking up pretty well. So, and this is also going to be my focus in I would say hyper automation. Couple of areas which have really not been touched upon in the past is, how can you really bring employees into your journey, right? For example, or rather your clients into your journey. So for example, I talked about the low code platform, right? So then how do you ensure that the application development, which was really a huge and humongous task for the team to work on, that is where you kind of bring in clients, and then the client start developing some applications. And by the way, it has started really happening into the world. So then you really make them understand what is the next road of automation, and then possibly client become a part of that journey. And then the second part is basically bringing in more platforms. Gone were the days, right, when you only bring RPAs or maybe AIs. Now it's time for you to look out for platforms which you can deploy, and hence reusability of the use cases that you have in one part of the organization to the other becomes more effective. So I think platform is going to be the second key area of focus. So we might need to kind of evaluate what really works for one set of organization versus others and things like that. So that kind of evolution has to happen. And I guess the third part is basically around how do you ensure that the changes that you bring in are really sustainable, right? So earlier organizations, what used to happen, right, most of the time, people used to focus around, bringing in a project manager for automation, and then he would oversee the operations. And once the project is over, he's gone. I think that level of thought process has to really transform into a problem management area. So I think Google has pretty much worked on this, I think way back in 2008 and 9, and we call that as SRE, the site reliability engineering. What it essentially means that you need to look out for issues within your IT support areas and try and identify the ways to fix it, so that then your team is focused on automating your mundane tasks. So then the SRE is going to be my key third focus, and then scaling the SRE platform and the low code platform, I think would really help me envision or realize the vision of hyper automation. And operations anywhere is something that we need to solve by looking out for different ways on how can a VPN can be configured pretty quickly, and maybe other ways of how to ensure that with, even though you're working on sensitive client information, how can you create an alternate mechanism where your employees can work from anywhere, any part of the world they are in, right? We don't know. I think I'm hearing that there is some new issue coming in apart from COVID. So I think we might need to look out for the ways how we even sustain that kind of situation. So I think these would be my key focus areas, which will eventually keep me busy in the coming years, is what I can think of, Dan.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Well, if it's anything like this last year, it'll all change in 3 months anyway. But hopefully, we'll check in with you in a few months and see how you're doing. But thanks for joining us, Ashish Gupta, McKinsey. Really appreciate your time, and enjoy the new year.
Thank you so much, Dan. It was wonderful speaking to you. Take care.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.